Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Eliz Green.
And I'm Tom Singer. And the Webinar Talk Show is a concept that Eliz and I came up with because we sort of realized in this stay-at-home world that there were a lot of webinars. And many webinars. And a lot of people were getting webinar fatigue. And we realized that a webinar doesn't have to be an hour and it doesn't have to be a talking head over PowerPoint. So we came up with the Webinar Talk Show.
Which is really a way of allowing people to impart the things that need to be imparted, provide that content in a way that's engaging for the virtual audience. Because there is nothing more boring than slides and droning behind the slides. Was on one of those last night. It takes a lot of concentration to absorb that information when it's not engaging at all. So if you can combine some personality and a really good interview, and of course, always a really good guest.
And today we have a great guest, and we're going to get into some really interesting ideas about how people can think in good times and in bad.
That's right. And I've known Courtney Clark for several years now. I didn't know how much we had in common, particularly in our work. We kind of come at different angles at the same idea. I'm always focused on stress, and Courtney is really interested in how do we make better decisions. I find that incredibly fascinating. Courtney Clark, welcome to the Webinar Talk Show.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us, Courtney.
Hi there.
Yay! So we did a webinar that was very engaging last week, I think, and I got the chance to learn a little bit more about what you do. And the thing that I found the most fascinating, and you and I share that geeky, read a lot of research thing, is your research around adaptive thinking. Tell us what adaptive thinking is.
So adaptive thinking, I'm still working to define it because there isn't one agreed upon definition. I found the word in some research. Somebody was talking about thinking adaptively. And I was like, ooh. That's because we live in a world where so much changes, but a lot of times people report saying, there's just always change, and we have so much change fatigue because we're always changing, but nothing's ever really changing. Mm-hmm. So when I deal in resilience, and I thought, I really want to know more about what does this mean and how can people use this idea. And so adaptive thinking appears to be, and what I'm working to create is a strategy, a method that people can use to develop more and better ideas and options, especially in a new situation. And by the way, we're in a new situation in the world right now.
I was just going to say, if ever there was a time that we needed adaptive thinking, no matter how you define it, I think that time is now.
Yeah, I really wish that I had been working on this 2 years ago and not just starting in the past year. I wish that I was already off and running with this, but it's such an exciting time to be thinking about this and talking through it with people.
It is indeed. One of the things that you shared was that adaptive thought can help people and companies be more successful. How does that work?
So one of the things that I found fascinating in the research is that many times we make decisions, we go with our gut, right? Mm-hmm. And especially if we've been doing what we do for a while, say you're a successful executive at a company, you have a good gut feeling about what's going to work. And your gut feeling may very well be right, particularly if you're facing a situation that you've faced before. But if you're facing a situation that you've never faced before, a lot of times we default to our first good idea. We just go, oh, you know what? I think that sounds good. And we run with it. In the research, I found something that I thought was really neat. that comes from the addiction world. In the addiction world, they have this phrase called first thought wrong. They try to train you that, that little voice in your head that tells you like the first option, the first, oh, this must mean X, Y, or Z, that is actually the least likely to be true. And so with adaptive thinking, what we're really going for here is how do people and how do companies understand that their best chances at success is not choosing that first thought, that first option, not just going, oh, this is a good idea, let's just roll forward, but how do we dig a little deeper? And so adaptive thinking can be a collective process where a group continues to dig a little deeper and come up with something that may be even closer to the right answer versus the way we've always done it or what's worked before. Because when you're in a novel environment, what's worked before, there's no guarantee that it's going to work today.
Right. Right. And some of this came to you in your own journey with cancer, correct?
Yes. All of this started, I've been talking and researching about resilience for about 7 years. And I got into that because I'm a 3-time cancer survivor and a brain aneurysm survivor. And so every stop along the way, I had to set off on a new path, right? There was no clear, do this, go this, oh, this is the way to success. And I got fascinated by this concept of resilience. Why are, some people resilient and others not? And how do we remain successful even when the course changes? And one of the things I found about resilience is that oftentimes I think people correlate resilience with optimism and a positive attitude. And it's not the same thing. And
right.
a positive attitude and optimism can be lovely things to have. They can also, by the way, work to your detriment. If you always expect the best, my dad always said, expect the best, but be prepared for the worst.
Right, right.
And I tell you what, I have not, that is the phrase of my dad's that gets used the most in my household because it's applicable to everything. And so it's that realistic positivity. So I'm always looking for, how do I explain resilience to people in a way that shows them it doesn't have to do with your attitude or your personality, that it's more about your behaviors. And so when I stumbled on this concept of adaptive thinking and started realizing, I think there could be a strategy here that we could teach people, that was the light bulb moment for me, because I'm always looking for, how do we give people a set of behaviors so that they realize it doesn't matter what your personality type is.
Right. It doesn't matter if you're Susie Sunshine all the time, or as I like to call it, Eeyore. It doesn't matter, because adaptive thinking is a skill set, not a personality type or
a method. Yeah. And so, and I think the more we can talk about it as strategies, methods, and not just about the personalities of positivity, I think we can help a lot more people, because right now somebody may hear something and resilience still can get associated with these soft skills. So some people go, oh, well, that's, I can't be that because I'm not optimistic. I'm not a positive person. So they just write it off.
Right.
And then other people on the flip side may say, oh, well, I already am that, so I don't need to worry about it.
Right. Well, I got that down. It's fine.
Yeah.
Courtney, I want to go back to one thing that you said when we started off, and that was, you talked about this idea of first thought wrong.
Yeah.
One of the things I found in dealing with people is it's hard to get most people, not all, but it's hard to get most people to ever admit that any of their thoughts are wrong, right? I mean, we all have that friend who has never in her life admitted that she's made a mistake within your friend group, within her career, or whatever. So
you're not talking about Eliz, though.
no,
Obviously.
no, not at all. No.
No, I admit to all of my mistakes. Unless
Yeah,
you ask my
I learned-
husband, then probably I don't.
I learned a long time ago that I'm wrong a lot, but a lot of people never want to go there. And so when you were saying that, I was nodding,
Yeah.
but I thought we have to go back to that, because how do you get some people to ever, if an individual or a group, to ever say, hey, I had this idea, maybe it's not right?
Yes. So this is part of the process. And actually, interestingly, I've dealt with this a lot in my past resilience work, because one of the key pillars of resilience is getting perspective. And people ask me all the time, well, how do I help my daughter get perspective? Or, my dad, and he just so, and perspective is not, it is a personal choice. You cannot give it to somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
We try. Have you ever heard somebody be like, oh, well, at least you don't have it as bad as so-and-so. We try to give other people perspective, and it never works. It always backfires. And so, Thom, you're exactly right that this is going to have to be something that people embrace on their own. It is going to be hard for somebody to say to somebody else, well, you're not, thinking adaptively, remember first thought wrong. But what we can show are the benefits of allowing people to explore. So I came at this concept of realizing that we need to keep going deeper, first thought wrong. It actually happened that I learned this during my cancer treatment. So I was sitting there at the cancer hospital, and the doctor had given me several options of what I could do. And I'm 26 years old. This is my first experience with major illness and trying to make these decisions. And the nurse came in. I said, I don't know what to do. He gave me 4 options. How do I choose between 4 options? And she pointed out that he'd given me 4 options for a reason. Because often in medical care, but in many other options in life, I feel like we get 3 choices.
Right.
And the nurse pointed out, she said, if he had given you 3 choices, you would have leaned towards the one that you perceived as the middle choice. This one, this might be really radical treatment. This one might be a little too conservative. So everybody would go towards the middle. If we give 4, then we feel that people weigh their options with a lot more care and consideration, and they can actually make better decisions. So I've started calling that the Goldilocks paradox. If you have options, they're gonna pick the one that feels like it's in the middle. So if I explain that to somebody, they're like, oh, yes.
Right. When you said Goldilocks paradox, I'm like, oh my God, that's the title of your book. That's amazing. I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, that is. Go buy that URL. Go trademark. Like, grab that right now.
This one's just right.
That's what we think. We have this sense that this middle option is probably the safest option, and we go towards it. So more options are better. They've done research that shows that actually your more creative solutions to problems come much later in the option generation process. Because those first options, well, they're the most similar to how we've solved it before. So if you're looking for something innovative, you want to keep that brainstorming session going. Really, research shows over the course of days, not an hour, and certainly not 15 minutes. Because the more options we have to choose from, you avoid that Goldilocks paradox, and you get 4 or more options. And then you're actually able to weigh things without your brain getting in the way.
That is fascinating.
So I think that's how we tell people to go deeper and avoid that first thought wrong.
I'm a little I'm chewing on that quite a bit because we're going to have Lori Guest on tomorrow, who teaches sales, and she does teach that like, here are the 3 options, and you're squeezing your buyer towards that middle option. That's the one that you want them to choose. So of course it makes sense that you would want to think about, okay, here are the 3 that are sort of obvious. Maybe that's not the end of the discussion. And do you see, let's say it's in a company and you're trying to come up with the things that you're going to do. You have one session, you come up with 2 or 3 options. How long do you keep coming back to that and thinking about other options?
I mean, I think how long depends on the company. It depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish and how big the problem is that you're trying to solve. I think that what's really important is that you get the diverse opinions heard, because when you're talking about a company, a lot of times people default not just to the way we've always solved this problem, but the way of solving this problem that we've always solved this problem, meaning the same voices speak up, the same people do the research, and so how in the world would we get a different result, a vastly different result, to solve these huge, completely unusual problems that are coming at us right now if it's all the same voices, it's all the same process. The more we shake up the process, then the results may shake out differently.
So my brain is spinning right now to the world of media, right? All of us make our living as professional speakers and trainers, and we have been going to live conferences for, in my case, 15 years, same thing for you guys, for a long time. And when you really think of a live event, it's a ballroom or a convention center room with chairs and speakers who go an hour. I mean, it's always kind of the same. Right. In today's world, we've had to jump to everybody becoming virtual instantly. And what I see so many people doing is just having a talking head go for an hour, giving a keynote the way they would in front of a live audience. And as you're talking, I'm like, of course, that's what so many people are doing, because it's all we know.
All we know.
We're going to the options that we're comfortable with and taking it into this whole new world of video. And I think the more options that we look at, all of a sudden, we can do this in a lot of different ways.
That's right. That's right. And one thing kept coming through more and more and more in the research, and it's this simple phrase, what else? And the more times we ask ourselves, what else? What else? The better our results are. And that's not just when it comes to problem solving, but that's actually true, in our personal lives. So I don't know about y'all, but sometimes you may have friction with somebody and you immediately, no, Thom
never.
I have no idea what you mean about having friction with other human beings.
Yeah,
I get along famously with everybody.
Famously. Excellent. Or maybe you misinterpret something that somebody says and you're like, what is that? So I have, since doing this research, had to remind myself, like, what else could she have meant by that? What else could be going on? Because again, first thought wrong, we often make an assumption based on what may have been true before or what we know from our experience. And so realizing that this concept of what else, 4 times or more, that digging for what else is going to help us fix things better in our professional lives, in our personal lives, rather than make assumptions or rather than solve the wrong problem, because a lot of organizations, a lot of people waste time solving the wrong problem. And so, this adaptive thinking is definitely a method for solving problems. But in particular, I also see its value for making sure we're solving the right problems, figuring out the right problems before we even get into that. And there's,
yeah, that's an interesting what else question. What else could be going wrong here? Instead of just saying, oh, this is the problem, let's fix that problem, asking, what else could be happening here?
And not just what else can we do about this?
Right. And I think right now, as people are adjusting to, online human relations, like HR has changed in a big way. That question of what else could be going on here is really important.
Yeah. And I think as we, whatever we take forward from this to the new normal, right? Mm-hmm. However things go back to being in the world, I think that it's very important for organizations to start looking at how they are training and retaining their employees in new ways. Because what I found that was really important about developing this adaptive thinking was how we tell stories.
Oh,
yeah, it was very surprising to me. So if you start researching adaptive thinking, one spot where you'll see it pop up the most is in the military. They use this phrase, adaptive thinking, as a skill that soldiers could use in the field. They haven't defined what it is really, but they know that it's a valuable quality to have. And they did some really interesting research where they took new soldiers and they trained them the way they've always trained them, which is what's called errorless training. It's how most of us get trained to do our work. You train on a skill over and over, and you repeat it and you repeat it until you can do it with no errors. Errorless training.
Yes. Right? Okay.
Can you run this report? Can you find this figure? Can you do X, Y, and Z? Errorless training. But what they found is that in real life, soldiers who had trained with errorless training, they had drilled over and over, if this happens and you do this, if this happens and you do this, if this happens and you do this, they actually didn't perform as well in the field as soldiers who had done what's called error exposure training. Yeah, and so we think that you train to not make errors, but error exposure training allowed soldiers to go, oh, I heard that story from that general, and he said that this thing happened, and then actually, there was an explosive here, but it seemed like it should be over here. And they then can tap into not just their own experience and knowledge, but other people's experience.
Stories. Yeah.
Yes, it's a story, and that then allows them to recall, oh, what else might I be missing here? What else could this be? Rather than wrote like this leads to this.
I do this and then I do that and then I do this. Yeah.
They were able to think adaptively because they had other people's stories to tap into. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that we all can do and take forward. We have an opportunity right now, virtually, to share stories during this time. Stories of success, stories of failure. We have this opportunity to start gathering these stories so that as we move forward into whatever this brave new world is going to be, we've got a resource to tap into and say, I heard something similar.
So Courtney, your research must be fascinating because both Eliz and I are like on the edge of our seats as you're talking about this. So as we wrap this up, let's take this to the real world. If somebody's listening going, yeah, my company is just doing what we used to do in this format. Our meetings are the same, our sales are the same, our marketing is the same.
Right.
What are a couple of takeaways you would give people about how to start adaptive thinking right now?
I love it. So if you're an individual who maybe doesn't even have a leadership position, I think the best thing that you can do is start to model adaptive thinking yourself for the rest of your colleagues. There's nothing, you don't have to be a manager to gently prod, well, what else could be going on here? Or what else do we have as an option? You can search for 4 choices just by being a participant in the room. And as you start to model that you're constantly going deeper and looking for more and not just settling on the way we've always done it and that first thought, then I think that your colleagues are going to jump on board with you. You can also do what we just talked about and start to share those stories. And if you then not share the stories, but maybe what you share is a story that you heard and how it influenced you, then other people can see the value and they can see the takeaway and say, oh, that was really successful for Thom. Oh, Eliz had heard that story and then she was able to make a really good decision. So I'm going to then use Eliz's story and that'll be my story to then take and make a good decision from. So I think that, everybody can lead wherever they are. That's how you do it with adaptive thinking.
I think that's great. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for joining us here on the Webinar Talk Show and sharing your story. If people want to know more about Courtney Clark, how do they find you?
They can find me at CourtneyClark.com.
That's easy.
Yeah.
And they should find you at CourtneyClark.com.
I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You're not either.
And I think by happenstance, Thom and I have employed some adaptive thinking in how we're moving our business. Perhaps it's because I spent some time with you, very possible, but thinking about what else can we do, which is why we created this thing that we're doing every day, so that we can showcase what else we can do and what else everybody could do to make their virtual events suck less.
And well, that's right. And I just spent 45 minutes on the phone with the president of an association today, talking about what can they do for their virtual conference. And we kept doing, I didn't know we were even doing this, but we kept saying, what else can we do that's not just a broadcast of a talking head? What other format can you do? How can you mix it up? And I gave her like 6 different formats that they could use to be able to get the message out there, and they can have Eliz and I host it and actually do interviews and panel discussions and other things. And she got really excited because she walked away with 6 options for how they could do it.
It's the perfect example. Nothing about this is impossible for anybody. And many of us already do it naturally. It's realizing, okay, I need to be sure that I'm doing this. Did I do this enough times? Did I go deep enough? And to just recognize that it is a method that then gives you the fuel of like, I did this.
Well, I'm a big fan of celebrating all victories. So yay, we had Courtney on the Webinar Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everybody for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the Webinar Talk Show.
Tomorrow's going to be awesome. We'll see you then. Thank you very much.